All right, Nick, let's talk about the hottest team in the NFL right now, and that is none other than the Detroit Lions. They had some crazy plays, some crazy stuff going on against the big win over the Minnesota Vikings, and we're going to talk about some aspects in particular of that game that we want to get into. But, Nick, quite frankly, the biggest factor of the Lions winning is not only them having a legitimately good team, a well-rounded team, but the coaching, Nick. The coaching's been really good. Dan Campbell has been great. He's really been, quite the leader this season. But we got to ask the Lions fans in the comments below. Obviously, Dan Campbell has got to be at the top of a lot of people's lists right now. But we want to know, who has been your favorite Lions head coach throughout history? There's quite a few. You got Fontes. You had Mariucci, who, maybe not that one. Caldwell, Marty
Good.
Morningweg. There's been a lot of Lions coaches, some better than others. So let us know in the comments below, who is your favorite Lions coach of all time? But Nick, what has the current Lions head coach been up to?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Miles. We're talking about leadership. We're talking about culture. And that's what Dan Campbell was brought in to do with Detroit Lions, was to change the culture, to be a leader, leading from the front. And he certainly has done that in some ways good, in some ways not as good, or at least not as much as Detroit Lions fans have liked. But recently, he's done an outstanding job. It's about being the right leader, the face of the franchise, and having the right message for, the team, the organization. And I think he's showing a lot of it. And he had an interview on the Pat McAfee show. And I don't just talk about part of the interview. I'm going to read from part of the interview here. There's specifically about the Penei Sewell catch on third down that, for all intents and purposes, iced the game during that trick play. So when Dan Campbell was asked about it on the McAfee show, this is what he said. He said, quote, "Here's another thing that happened. These things happen during the game. So we're in that situation, and the fans are doing the wave around the stadium. And so I'm just watching. I hear Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, 'Hey, coach, do you want to?' And I'm so focused on the wave. I said, 'Yeah, that's fine.' I look up, and we're throwing it to Penei, and I'm like, 'What the expletive we doing?' They said, 'Coach, you said it was fine. It worked out great. It was unbelievable.'" All right, Miles. So this is one of those things, right? So he's sitting here, Dan Campbell sending his message, the interview to McAfee, saying, "Hey, listen, biggest play of the game. I was distracted by the fans. I didn't even know what the heck was going on, and we just got it done." He's lying, right? He's 100% lying. He definitely called that play. He approved the play. Johnson may have called the play. He definitely approved the play. He knew what was going on. He knew the situation. What he's doing here is just an example of his leadership, and this is an example of why the Lions are playing great football and why all signs point to the fact they're on the right track. He is giving all the credit to Johnson. He's giving all the credit to Sewell. He's giving all the credit to Goff. How many times do we hear coaches and players, sometimes after a moment in the game, you hear this every time. It gets so old. It's like, "Yeah, in that situation, we knew they'd line up and cover four quarters. I checked the weak side linebacker, and with my counter zip motion, I knew he would be open the flat. On the third hitch, I checked the backside, blah, 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 and hit him in square." It's just like we practiced. We practiced and rep that all week. We knew it was going to work, and it worked great. You get kind of that nauseum football stuff. And here you have Dan Campbell, the leader. He could take credit. He could say, "Hey, listen, that was on, me. We did it. We practiced all week. We knew that trick play would work, and I knew that was the right time to call it and approve it." And no, he gives all the credit to Johnson. He gives all the credit to Sewell. He gives all the credit to Goff. And that's how you build a winning culture. I've been wondering how Goff has been making such vast improvements in his game. I thought he was done coming into the season. He's been spectacular. It's things like this. It's diffusing the credit. It's handing off the credit to guys like Johnson and Goff, is why the Lions are playing great football and why their trajectory is 100% in the right direction. And I think this is one of the better examples of leadership we've seen in the NFL from the head coach position in recent memory.
Yeah, Nick, and props to Dan Campbell for going on one of the superior podcasts. We love Pat McAfee show.
100%.
So great for him. Also, I was listening to Pardon My Take, and they had another Lions guest on there, Eric Decker, and this just goes on to support your point, Nick, is that they have been practicing this play a lot. They specifically had Sewell line up as, the heavy tight end, as a eligible receiver a few plays prior to this, and just ran him in motion. He was a blocker, kind of conditioning to them, hey, when Sewell's out there, he's going to be a blocker. And then when he goes in as a receiver, boom, hits him out of nowhere. They're not expecting it. But throughout the game, they had done that a couple of times, and they had ran it in practice numerous times, per Eric Decker mentioning that. So, yes, of course he knew about it. Of course they were planning on doing it, and they set it up perfectly, and it worked, and it was great. And the great thing about Dan Campbell, Nick, if it didn't work, he would have taken credit for it. He'd have been like,
100%.
that was me. That was my bad. I wanted to try something crazy. It was maybe a little bit too much. It was my fault. And that's just the kind of guy he is. He doesn't take the credit for anything good. He gives it off to his guys because he knows all he needs to know at the end of the day is they won the game. That's all the credit that he needs. And if something bad happens, it doesn't matter who it is. And this is what great leaders do both on the football field and in the business world, Nick, is when something bad happens, you take the lumps on your back. You say, hey, that was my fault. I should have done something better here. And I feel like Dan Campbell would have done that as well. So, that's why we love him. That's why he seems like a great coach. And at the beginning of the season, people are like, hey, this guy, he seems like a great leader. He seems like an emotional leader, given, the heavy metal song references, all the kind of cool stuff. But we want the result. And here where the results are coming in, Nick. So you gotta believe in a guy like Dan Campbell like this, because not only is he saying and doing all the right things, but he's getting the results at the same time. And everything is coming up aces for the Detroit Lions lately.
Oh, 100%. And it's one of the narratives with Dan Campbell that he's kind of a meathead, ex-jock. He may not be the brightest bulb in the drawer, and it's 100% false, right? He played tight end, I think, for 8 years in the NFL. To execute and play football at that level, you can't be a dumb guy. He played for Bill Parcells. You can't be a dumb guy and play for Bill Parcells, right? It's just one of those things. You have to be able to know the offense. To play tight end, it's kind of one of those positions. You have to know the route tree like a wide receiver and blocking schemes like an offensive lineman. He played tight end. He later coached tight ends. Obviously, he's now the head coach of Detroit Lions, working his way through the ranks there. He's not a dumb guy. He knows football just about better than anybody. You don't get to the level he's at. You don't get the respect he has from the coaching staff and the players in the NFL community by being a dumb guy. It is his personality and just how he carries himself gives that message of jock, but it's all part of his leadership. It's all part of the fact it's like, hey, I've got a lot of smart guys around me. I don't need to sound smart. I don't need to sound like the nerdiest football nerd of all time that's really in vogue and bring up analytics and different stuff in press conferences, things like that. He just wants to talk about winning games because he knows ball. He's secure in himself, and you're seeing the results on the field because his security, his confidence, his leadership is rubbing off on the other coaches. It's rubbing off on the defensive players. It's rubbing off on the offensive players, and we're seeing it in the growth week to week, season to season. And right now, nobody wants to play the Detroit Lions because they're probably the second best team in terms of how they're playing recently in the NFC. I've been very impressed with Dan Campbell. He's blown my expectations completely out of the water.